In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful. Believers, fear not, fear and worry as tools of the devil. One of the greatest struggles for the human soul is the battle against fear and worry. Fear of the future, fear of people, fear of loss, fear of failure. These emotions often weigh heavily on hearts. The Quran explains that such fear is not from God, but rather one of the devil's most powerful tools. By instilling fear and worry, Satan seeks to distract the believer from trust in God and weaken their faith. The Quran, however, offers reassurance and guidance. Believers are repeatedly reminded not to fear or grieve, but to place full reliance on God. The only fear that is beneficial is the reverent awe of God, which keeps one steadfast and mindful. All other fear of people, events, or imagined futures is misplaced and harmful to the soul. Key verses and reflection. I seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. Chapter 3, verse 175. It is the devil's system to instill fear into his subjects. Do not fear them and fear me instead, if you are believers. This verse exposes Satan's tactic. Fear is the weapon he uses to paralyze hearts. God commands believers not to fear people, threats, or worldly forces, but to fear Him alone. To fear God means to live responsibly, to be aware of His authority, justice, and mercy. To fear others is to give them power over your soul, which rightfully belongs only to God. Chapter 3, verse 176. Do not be saddened by those who hasten to disbelieve. They never hurt God in the least. Instead, God has willed that they will have no share in the hereafter. They have incurred a terrible retribution. Here, God tells the believers not to let grief or worry consume them. Because of those who reject faith, their rejection does not harm God, nor should it weaken the believer's spirit. Fear and sadness over the actions of others is unnecessary. Each soul is accountable only for itself. Chapter 2, verse 38. Those who follow my guidance will have no fear, nor will they grieve. This verse provides a timeless promise. Whoever holds firmly to God's guidance will be shielded from the two greatest emotional burdens: fear of what is to come, and grief over what has passed. Fear and grief are natural emotions, but they do not overpower the heart of a true believer who trusts in God's plan. Chapter 10, verse 62. Absolutely, the allies of God have nothing to fear, nor will they grieve. This verse elevates the state of the faithful, those who are close to God, through trust and obedience, are given spiritual immunity from fear and grief. Their hearts rest in peace, anchored in divine assurance. Chapter 41, verse 30. Surely, those who say, "Our Lord is God," then lead a righteous life. The angels descend upon them. You shall have no fear, nor shall you grieve. This verse reveals the reward of steadfast faith and righteous living. Angels themselves descend with reassurance, removing fear of the future and grief over the past. Here, God emphasizes that fear and grief are not meant to dominate a believer's life. Instead, they are replaced by divine peace. Chapter 2, verse 62. Surely, those who believe, those who are Jewish, the Christians, and the converts, anyone who believes in God and the last day, and leads a righteous life, will receive their recompense from their Lord. They have nothing to fear, nor will they grieve. This verse expands the promise universally. Anyone who truly believes in God and leads a righteous life is free from fear and grief. It is a reassurance that divine mercy covers all sincere seekers of truth. Chapter 7, verse 49. Are these the ones you swore that God would never bless them? Enter paradise. You have nothing to fear, nor will you grieve. Here, those once dismissed or looked down upon are welcomed into paradise, reassured of eternal safety and joy. The repeated declaration, "nothing to fear, nor will you grieve," shows that in God's presence, fear and grief are forever removed. Theological and spiritual insights. Satan's strategy: fear and worry. Satan uses fear as a weapon. He whispers fears of poverty, loss, loneliness, or danger. When these fears dominate, the believer may hesitate to act righteously, compromise their values, or lose inner peace. Fear diverts the heart away from trusting God's control. The right kind of fear. The Quran distinguishes between two types of fear: fear of God, taqwa, reverence, mindfulness, accountability. This keeps the believer humble, sincere, and righteous. Fear of others, fear of people, events, or worldly harm. This is the devil's fear, harmful, enslaving, and distracting. God tells us repeatedly to replace the latter with the former. Trust in God, tawakkul, removes fear. Placing trust in God means understanding that nothing happens without His will. This awareness eliminates unhealthy fear. As God says, chapter 65, verse 3, "Whoever puts his trust in God, He suffices him." Trust is the antidote to fear. When the believer knows God's power is absolute, Satan's whispers lose all influence. Courage in adversity. Throughout the Quran, prophets and believers faced rejection, threats, and danger. Yet, they did not surrender to fear. Their strength came from faith. Just as the Quran says, chapter 33, verse 39, "They delivered God's messages, and feared Him alone, and never feared anyone else." God is the most efficient reckoner. The prophets feared only God, never creation. This model is the example for all believers. Conclusion. Fear and worry are tools of the devil, designed to weaken hearts and distract from God. The Quran, however, offers the cure. Do not fear people, fear God alone. Do not grieve over rejection or loss. God controls all outcomes. Trust God fully, He suffices. Remember that those who follow guidance will have no fear, nor will they grieve. The Quran repeatedly reassures us that fear and grief are not the destiny of believers. Instead, their destiny is peace, trust, and courage. By seeking refuge in God, remembering His words, and relying on His guidance, the believer rises above the whispers of Satan. In doing so, the heart becomes free, fearless, and at peace in the light of God's mercy.